Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Running Tales podcast, where we tell the extraordinary stories of everyday runners. We are part of the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. Listen, I've been told off for waffling too long in my intros, so just go and check out the Everyday Athlete Podcast. Check out Run Try Bike. Check out Running Tales. Those names will all be in the show notes. And once you're there, I trust you to do a bit of investigation and find out all about us and then share us everywhere, because I think we tell some stories that are worth telling. And what the story we are going to be telling today is that of filmmaker Rodney Fuentes. And Rodney covers and made a film about the Monarch Ultra, which is an absolutely extraordinary ultramarathon that covers parts of Canada and of America and of Mexico, and follows the route of the monarch butterfly, and it's really all about helping to preserve that butterfly. So I'm going to bring Rodney forward now, and we're going to talk to him about it because he knows far more about this than I do. So hi, Rodney, how are you?
Hi, how are you? Good. I'm good.
Yeah, I'm not too bad. So listen, I mentioned a little bit about it there myself, but as I said, you know far more about it than me. Can you tell everybody what the Monarch Ultra is, and really the aim behind it, because I think that's the really important thing, isn't it?
Yeah, the Monarch Ultra it's a relay run we organized in 2019, and we started in Peterborough, Ontario, Canada, and we kind of designed a map to go all the way to Mexico. So the route was 4,300 kilometers in total. And the aim of the run itself is to raise awareness for monarch butterfly conservation. So the last 20 years, the monarch butterfly, the population has declined about 80%. And that for us, it was a big deal because monarchs is one of the most common butterfly species in Canada, and I think in the US as well. So the fact that we can hardly see them now, it kind of raised the alarm. So what's going on with the monarchs, but also what's going on with insect pollinators in general. So the run was kind of like the attention getter. And as we run, we're following the same migration path of the monarchs that fly that same distance to Mexico to spend their winters. And we say, well, we're going to run at the same time the monarchs are flying there. So we decided to start the run around the same time when the monarchs leave Canada, and arrive pretty much around the same time the monarchs arrived in Mexico. So they fly approximately an average of 80 kilometers a day to get there. So it took us about 47 days journey.
Yeah, they are, and we'll get into it, pretty incredible ultra inverted commas runners or ultra flyers in their own right, and it's an incredible human effort to try and keep up with them, and obviously they're doing it on their own. But before we get into that, I kind of wanted to get into some of the environmental side of this, which you touched on, because you're talking about seeing less monarch butterflies, and obviously that's important. We'd all like to see them; they're beautiful creatures, but it's actually far more serious than that, because the way that mankind is affecting these butterflies can have huge impacts on our lives on this earth as well as theirs.
We know on paper what's happening with the monarchs. We know that there's habitat loss, right? And here in North America, the habitat impact the plant where the caterpillar feeds on is called a milkweed. And there's less and less milkweed. And then we know that also there's a problem with pesticide use and how the pesticides are causing a lot of decline on not just monarch butterfly, but many other insects and bees. And then we also knew that there's problem in the sanctuary in Mexico, where there's deforestation when the monarchs spend their winter. But there's a difference between knowing all that on paper and actually seeing it. And one of the things we wanted to do is, if we run the same route of the monarchs, we'll be able to see what they see. We'll be able to encounter what they encounter. So if they're tired because they have to eat on the way, so they need wild flowers to feed on nectars to get enough juice in order to continue going south. And sometimes where is those flowers? So we start seeing what the monarch butterfly encounter. some kind of signs of climate change, pesticides, everything that we know that is causing the species to decline. But we kind of wanted to witness that. It's not just the Monarch Ultra is not just a story of, okay, a scientist told me this is happening. It's I actually want to see what is happening and see proof for myself if I actually need to be a scientist to actually see what's happening and understand why the insect populations are in decline.
Mm. And so I suppose the obvious question off the back of that is, what did you find as the Monarch Ultra was going on, and also I suppose how did you record that, because obviously that was central to your role in all of this.
Well, we recruit runners to begin with, and every runner has to run a minimum distance of 50 kilometers. That's why it's called Monarch Ultra, 'cause the ultra has to be an official ultra marathon distance. So some ran 50, some ran 80, some ran 100. So and it has to be on a relay, which is actually harder than just having one person to run the whole way. Because if it's just one person, which requires an insane amount of fitness to do it and be able to run a marathon every single day for many days, but it's just one person to coordinate. So the problem arises when you have over 40 people to coordinate and they have to arrive sometime in the middle of nowhere, which that's where the last person stopped running and went home. The next person
Yeah.
comes using their GPS to find us somewhere on the road in Texas or Arkansas or Ontario. And then they will start the run south. There's no people cheering around, and just the Monarch Ultra crew of 4 people.
Yeah.
So it was just a commitment for the runners to run for a cause. For me, as a filmmaker, it also was tricky because I was also part of the organizers of the Monarch Ultra. And then I have to also film and use the camera. So a lot of us kind of wear many different hats during this journey. But I have to do as many filmmaking as I could, which proved very challenging for many reasons. But one of those is because we were running along highways many times, and it's impossible to do an interview. So I brought a bike, and there's a couple of scenes you can tell that I'm on a bike because it's just too smooth and too fast. There's no way I can run that fast and keep it nice and smooth without any camera shaking. And the whole idea for me was actually bike most of the route. So the runner is running, I'm on a bike carrying my gear. I go farther than the run, then I can set up the camera, I can do some filming, hop on the bike again, and do that kind of thing. But it actually proved very difficult because running on really busy highway, there's no way I can use a bike to go. So I used a few times, but not as much as I would like to. It would have been fantastic if I used the bike a lot more often. But we just encounter a lot of challenges, and those challenges has to do with roads, it has to do with dehydration, it has to do with injuries, it has to do sometimes we couldn't find food, and trying to picture what if a monarch butterfly runs into the same circumstances. More likely that little butterfly will die, and that will be the end of their journey. We have a little easier because we have an RV and we have vehicles and we have food with
They
us.
don't have a support crew, do they?
Exactly. So that kind of gives a little bit of perspective, right? It's like we got it pretty easy in comparison with how wildlife has it. So we have all this technology and warm homes and restaurants and communities that we can find everywhere to help us out. But wildlife, they're literally, even if they're on pack, they're still on their own, and it's just not easy for them to survive. When things go wrong, usually they don't survive. When things go wrong on our side, we have plenty of help on our way. So it was really nice to see that as a perspective from our own eyes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess, I mean, this might be a slightly clumsy comparison, but I suppose the to draw a line between the things that we were doing or you were doing on that run and what the butterfly's doing is what they're facing is as if someone's going along ahead of your runners and ripping up all those restaurants digging a great big hole in the road, throwing stuff at them, and basically meaning they haven't got the food, they haven't got what might be their support crew, which is the plants that they pollinate and feed on.
Exactly.
And that's why they're struggling to make this journey.
Yeah, and we are, I mean, wildlife, monarch butterflies in particular, are doing this migration because it's a survival thing. Like if they don't fly down, they're all gonna die up here.
Hmm.
So that is a survival skill, and it's something that they just have to do. We decided to do it. We didn't actually have to do it, which it makes is a very different. Humans also do some pretty epic migration also by foot, and some of them are extremely dangerous. I mean, if you look at Panama Darien Gap and all the problems with the immigrants from Latin America, many from Venezuela trying to cross the Darien Gap to go to Mexico and then cross Mexico to go to North America. And so many of them actually know the dangers of doing that journey, and they still do it. So even
Yeah.
we knowing what's may happen, they're still doing that because, well, unfortunately, their life is not very great. They just suffer so much from their own poverty and from the own issues they have in the countries they live. And they take the leap and say, okay, I'm just going to risk it and do it. So we can do it as well if the circumstances allows us for us to do those kind of situations. Yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose going back to the start, the formation of the Ultra. Obviously, you were part of the group organising it. Carlotta James, who I've spoken to before about this. People who've been listening to Running Tales for a long time might remember my interview way back with Carlotta. But what was the reason behind saying, do you know what we're going to do? We're not just going to, I don't know, hold a tombola or a quiz and raise a few pounds. We're going to run across 3 countries.
Yeah. Well, Carlotta is the engine and the heart behind the entire project. And she's a runner. And at that point, she wasn't an ultra runner, but she's run quite a few marathons and do a lot
Yeah.
of trail running and always enjoying different races. But she's also a landscaper, and I think that's her gym, right? That's how she stays fit and injury free. She's constantly lifting big, heavy plants and moving gravel and all that stuff. So, but landscaping also led her to be a gardener and to build pollinator gardens. And so he have a very strong connection with pollinators. He has a very strong connection with wildlife, and she's very well connected with nature in general. That's why most of her runs, she prefers to do trail runs. She wants to be when there's a trail, when there's trees, when there's wildlife, when there's birds singing. And it was one day she was running, and she saw the monarch butterfly, and somehow the idea just popped to her head because she's always used running as a way to. Every time she runs, she solved her own life. It's pretty funny. Like she just worked out all her problems or whatever, come with new ideas.
Yeah.
And then she come after a very long run and say, hey, I just got these ideas. And then she send emails and texts and stuff. And I say, and usually every time I get an email from her, something new, she usually get that idea when she was running. So
Yeah.
that's how it happened to her. And she thought about it. And I don't know how long it took, can't remember before that. And then she contacted me at some point. She saw a video on social media that I posted. And then she liked the video, and then she get in touch with me and say, hey, I got a crazy idea. Are you open to hear me out? And I say, yeah, come on over. She actually didn't know I was in Peterborough. It was pretty funny that we actually find out that we were like 500 meters from each other.
Yeah.
In the same town. It's hilarious. But she came over and she told me the idea, and I was like, okay, this is nuts. And I like nuts, which is great. And I love conservation. I love the whole concept. You want to run to Mexico, but we have no idea how to do this. So we need a race director. We need to figure out which organization we want to partner with to help us to not just to raise money, but also to help us along the way, and who we want to partner in terms of conservation efforts. So what's the point of running? Is this just a self-indulging thing? I've done this run, or we actually trying to raise awareness and do something? So obviously we did a lot of brainstorming to come
Yeah.
with the whole idea developed, and then we brought Carlota happens to know Clay Williams, who is a race director, and he planned the Canal Pursuit for mental health. Um, I can't remember how long it is right now, but it takes several days to do the whole run. So he has a lot of experience of running long distances and organizing those kind of runs.
Yeah.
He came on board, and from there we just start brainstorming and okay, this is what we're doing, and also why we're doing, which is to raise awareness.
Yeah. And obviously you ran that the ultra took place in full in 2019. I think since then, I mean, COVID came along, of course, but it's the Monarch Ultra has been present in various different forms over the years since 2019, if I'm correct.
Yeah, yeah. We thought we should. It took so much effort to organize the first one that we said, well, now that everything is laid out, we should do it every 2 years.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, things are not always that easy. Like we were out from our homes for how many was 7 weeks, and it's not easy for me to get out of work for 7 weeks to begin with, and it's not easy to leave family behind that long. I have small children at that point, and same thing with Carlota has a child. So it's just we figure, okay, this is really not sustainable for us to do it, and to do it the way we did it before. So the way that during the COVID we organized one that was just a run in Ontario.
Yeah.
And then and that was great. And then after that, again, the constraints of how to do this kind of run. So we decided just to do a local run in Peterborough, and we've done it a couple of times now. That is a 10K run and 1 kilometer for children to do. And then we have like a Monarch festival, and we get fundings for environmental costs. So everything we get from the run goes to for environmental costs that we choose. For 2 years in a row, we've chosen to give money to an organization called Nación Verde in Mexico, and they do forest restoration. So they have planted over 100,000 OML trees, which is the ones that monarchs likes to spend their winters. And they've done a fantastic job. So we feel good at giving them money for this kind of projects. So that's basically on the run side what we've done, and now we have some other plans for that's coming this year, at the end of the year.
Yeah, and I think, or I'm not sure whether you've actually managed to do this or not, but I know there was part of the plans was to have either the festival or a running event down in Mexico, where basically the Monarch's journey finishes as well.
Well, we tried to organize that a couple of years ago, and it was not easy to organize something from here in Mexico. So Nación Verde, that the same organization I mentioned before, they decided to take on the task. And now for the second year in a row, we actually just came back from Mexico like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And they organized a run, and it's not called the Monarch Ultra, but Monarch Ultra is kind of part of it, and they kind of acknowledge that we kind of ignite the fire, and now they're kind of taking from there, and they want to do this every year. So the run was beautiful. It was right at the base of the sanctuary, and they designed a route that is 5 kilometers. So original plan was 13 kilometers, and then you do 4 loops of that to make an ultra of 52 kilometers. But then it was too complicated, and so they only have a 5 kilometer route. And then if you want to run an ultra, which a couple of people did, then you do that how many 10 times? Yeah, and it was brutal. I didn't run. Unfortunately, I had a torn MCL that I happened cross country ski just a month ago, so I have to be an observer. I wasn't able to run, but my son did it, and it was the first time he ever ran 5 kilometers. And Tim, which is Carlota's wife, and their son did it as well.
Yeah.
They were saying that it was like running 10 kilometers here. Like it was like 200 meters of vertical elevation, and it was high altitude. So it's a lot of things for us to to get used to. But it was a magnificent event. There was a lot of people, and it was absolutely beautiful. So for us, it was a big deal because it's the first time that we know of that someone organized a run for the monarch butterflies that is not us, and we
Yeah.
inspiring these people to do it. So that actually feels really good as an organization to see that someone else is taking that initiative and to organize the runs.
Yeah, no, I think it's incredible to have an event like that happening down there in Mexico. Obviously, what you're doing in Ontario is carrying on. So you've got the start and finish lines for the butterfly sort of covered in there. And as you kind of alluded to there, there's people doing 50K ultras, and there's people doing their first 5K. So they're really ticking off all aspects of running and getting into running and personal fitness as well. So fantastic. But I suppose the bottom line question is whether you feel at this stage it's made how much of a difference it's made to preservation of the monarch butterfly, and are people listening more now as a result?
Well, it's hard to measure how much impact we have done for the preservation of monarchs, but I do know that we have the documentary and the efforts that the Monarch Ultra is doing has inspired communities to build more gardens, has inspired people to put more milkweed in their yards. I know with the run in Mexico now, there's more locals know about this, and they're willing to do whatever they can to protect the monarch butterflies. But more importantly, is that we are putting the monarch butterflies on a map on a different way. So when you watch a documentary, you realize that monarch is more than just an insect, and it's what it means for the people in Mexico. And that's strong connection, but also what it means in general for the environment. So if we help to protect monarch butterflies, we're helping to protect the watershed. We're helping to protect wildflowers, habitat. We're helping to protect all the type of wildlife. So it's kind of, I see the monarch butterfly to be more as a symbol, and that will spread out to nature in general. But the most important thing that I can see is how much more people are getting involved in conservation that is required related with monarch butterflies. And so many of them that I know, because I get emails and I get phone calls and stuff, and it's because of us. It's because that we kind of spark that, and
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many, but I know even if it's small, I know that can continue to grow. This one person tells another person, and hopefully we start getting full communities to get it on board with conservation, and that's something that we just have to wait a few more years to see how that develops.
No, it's really interesting to hear perhaps how that message does seem to be working its way through, especially with um, everyday people, inverted commas, I suppose, particularly when you might consider that there are certain voices out there, and some of those voices are in certain governments, shall we say, who might be pushing back and almost kind of saying that the environmental cause is not one that's worth listening to. Climate change doesn't really exist. We won't go into all that, but
Yeah.
but yeah, you may have a voice that sort of pushes back and says, well, actually, fair play about the butterfly, but it's more important that we have this land in, I don't know, the Midwest that is used for farming so that we can all eat properly. And
Yeah.
they don't necessarily care about the butterfly. And I just wonder whether you've had any pushback like along those lines at all.
Well, we don't know again with when it comes to government policies, but
Sure.
what I know is what we can do as community members, and I think that's what we're trying to inspire. So there are plenty of documentaries and activists that I'm trying to make, and scientists they're trying to make the government understand that we have to do something about, so our environment continues to degrade with climate change and other things. But not a lot of people are actually doing much for themselves. So, and I'm
Mm.
talking about what can you do in your community. If one community is doing well and can inspire another community, that thing, if eventually it's like a spider web, it's just going to spread out. So it's really people get powerless when thinking, okay, climate change is just too big. So how can I do anything to change that? And maybe you cannot do a whole lot to change climate change in general, but you can do a whole lot to change what's happening in your own neighborhood. what happened in your community, your city, your town, wherever you live. And I think that's one of the messages that we have in our documentary, in that Monarch Ultra as an organization, is how can we inspire just communities to start doing what you think is best for your community? Because there you have a voice. Everybody has a voice in their own community. And I think that's a really good way to start. And we have been seeing things, movement. It might not be necessarily with Monarch Ultra specifically, but there's definitely a movement of so many community members that I know of, not just here in Peterborough, but also all the areas in Canada. They are taking very strong initiatives to have pollinator gardens and to have better habitat for local wildlife.
Yeah. Do you think it's also a message that resonates potentially, particularly with runners and even a subset of runners in terms of trail and ultra runners who are getting out there in the countryside and out on the trails, and perhaps can see some of this happening or just have an affinity with nature?
We surprisingly, I thought we were going to get a lot more runners interested uh, from the beginning. And
Yeah.
there were a couple of runners who actually they're starting to raise butterflies and kind of do something to help with one of our populations. But we actually were surprised that we didn't get a pretty big, support from runners itself. And I guess that was part of the challenge for us, and we took it. We say like, okay, what if this project can actually help to change some of the running mentality, and people kind of start running more for a cause, which there are lots of run for cause actually, like for cancer,
Yeah.
kind of cancer, or some kind of health research, or diabetes or heart disease, or all those things. But I don't see a lot, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not huge into the running scene, but I don't see a lot of runs for the environment. I don't see a lot of that for, or kind of making funds to buy a lot of shoes to get kids to be running, even from a social cause, because social has a lot to do with environment. And then we actually have a social cause that it helps the poor somehow, or people that doesn't have the same access, and we want them to be runners as well. How many runs are like that I can promote that kind of activism? I don't know, but I don't see, at least in Canada, I don't see them very often. So we're trying to change the narrative a little bit in terms of, would you as a runner also have a way to give back and use your skills as a long distance runners to create attention, and hopefully we get more of those runners that can be more interested in environmentalism and start running for the environmental for the environment. And I think that will be a goal for us. I don't know how much we have accomplished for that, but I tell you, the two runs we have organized here in Peterborough, they're packed. There have been
Yeah.
a lot of people coming in, and they're not just coming in to run 10Ks. It's only 10K. You can run 10K anywhere. But why are they coming here? It's because we actually have a cause that is speaking to their heart, and that's the monarch butterflies and the environment. So I think that is a movement that can start growing among runners as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting, and I wouldn't by any means want to pretend to be any sort of expert on, how many runners are out there doing stuff for environmental causes or not. I mean, I do think there are some. You obviously have groups like the Green Runners who are having quite a big impact, and I have seen some races. They tend to, and I don't want to start a whole road runners versus trail runners debate because I'll get in all kinds of trouble. But it tends to be people who are out on trails who may get more involved in those causes, whereas some of the road races are still, and it's tough. It's tough to try and get this right, but they're still battling with things like plastic cups and so on
Yeah.
as a problem. And listen, I've done loads of road races. I've grabbed loads of plastic cups along the way because you need to drink water, and it's
Yeah.
it's a tricky subject to resolve. So there are definitely lots of questions about how running can be more environmentally friendly. I've had various runners on here in the past who've spoken about how they won't commute to runs within if they're unless they're within a certain distance, because they don't want to have that they're trying to keep their own emissions, I suppose, down or whatever. But then equally, you have people who want to do the marathon majors, and who am I and who is anyone else to necessarily tell them not to, because that is an incredible achievement. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that goes any way to answering what was originally my question, but I suppose it's like life in general, isn't it? You get some people who are really into these causes, and other people who perhaps, not to tar them the wrong way, but will just carry on with their own
Yeah.
lives and everything else, and a whole swathe of people somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a matter of making more sustainable for sure. And I
Mm.
think every sport has a negative effect on the environment in one way or another. So I do a ton of mountain biking, and yeah, it's mountain biking. It's like ripping the floor, the trails, and the cost to make a mountain biking has a massive negative environmental effects, and so on, so on. And if you play tennis, which I loved a lot, but tennis balls are not exactly very environmentally friendly, and how many millions of balls go to the landfill? So there's always something that is environmentally. But I think our mission for us to enjoy the outdoors and enjoy the environment is to be like, okay, how can I minimize my impact? Because everything you do is going to have an impact, but the less of the impact it is, I think the better it's going to be in the long run.
Yeah, and are there any, put you on the spot slightly, but are there any simple things that people can do to try and help the environment, to try and help the monarch butterfly, or any other local insects in their area?
Well, one of the main things to do is to plant trees or to plant flowers. So, or if you have a front yard and it's covered in grass, get rid of the grass and plant actually native plants that will attract insects and will attract wildlife to your yard. I think that's number one. Number two, try to do the best to support your local farmers. So the local farmers has they tends to be more sustainable. There's not this massive monoculture that we see in many places, and the money stays local. And they, if they do it the right way, and we actually pay the right amount that we need to pay for food, then many of them will do the best they can to grow their food in a more sustainable way so they don't have to use so much pesticides. So there's a cost for pesticide, there's a cost for not using pesticide, but we as consumer, we have a power to demand what kind of products we want. And by buying from companies that are more sustainable than others, it actually does make a pretty big difference. So we make those companies stronger, we make those farmers stronger, and they don't have to use as many pesticides or harm the environment as much. So every choice that we do when we purchase things, it has an impact, and it's a pretty big impact when you put it all collectively. So, and the other things you can do is kind of get involved. That every town has environmental organizations that they do things or wants to do things to make the community better. So if you don't know how, the best thing you can do is to volunteer and get in touch with those environmental organizations. You're gonna learn, and you either can put your volunteer work and effort to help them out to make the community greener, or you can donate them money, and then we'll have the resources with that money to educate people to make your community greener. So one way or another, that is a pretty good help.
Yeah, definitely. No, thanks for that, Rodney. That's some really good practical advice. I just want to turn now to your own filmmaking and so on. How was that something you got into in the first place, and has it always been environmental causes that have powered that forward?
Right. Well, the funny thing is, since I was a kid, I always wanted to be a writer, and I'm really bad at it. I'm really not a good
It's never
writer.
stopped me.
I try to write something. My wife's always telling me, it's like, I cannot see your personality in anything you write. And I say, yeah, it's true. I just cannot figure it out how put what's in here into writing. So I
Yeah.
always battle with that thing. But at the same time, some point in my early 20s, I became a tour guide, and I was guiding bird watching tours in Venezuela. And I became a guide, and I was guiding tours from the Amazon rainforest all the way to the top of the mountains in the Andes, and in so many different habitats area from the sea level to the mountain. And that was great. I spent many years working there, and you kind of learn as a not just as a bird watcher, you kind of become a naturalist. You learn a lot about plants. You learn about the animals, but also about the communities that live around those forests and that live around those natural areas. So you kind of treat them as equal, just like any other wildlife in the area. So it was a great learning experience. But I always have a friend who had a camera and take some great photos, and I always like, I really want to get a camera like yours. This would be
Yeah.
nice that I start documenting. And it wasn't until later here in Canada. I came to Canada in 2002. And a few years later, I started learning how to use a camera. And it started getting into me. And it wasn't until about 8 years ago, after a lot of try miss doing different things to make a living, that I figured out, I was like, you know what, I can start making a living with the camera. I think I'm good at it, and I can start promoting myself as a photographer and as a videographer. And then that kind of started evolving after I did a project with a local charity that they do a concert to give all the proceeds from the concert. They give it to a shelter, and it's called In From the Cold. So all the homeless and outside in the cold winters of Canada, and so they can have a place so they can sleep and have a warm bed and have some food. So they donate all the proceeds to that. And I didn't know anything about this project, and I volunteered. So my daughter was going to sing there one season, and I volunteered to, you guys, I need to make a video about this. And I've never done anything like this in my life. But the entire process from start to finish, from writing what's going to happen and edited it and filming, I fell in love with it immediately. So I made a 14-minute video. It was my first kind of documentary style I ever done.
Yeah.
And that's what I knew. I want to do this. And at the same time, I was fulfilling my childhood dream, because making film is the same as writing. It's just a different style of writing, and
Yeah.
that kind of resonates better to my personality. I guess you can tell now that I made the video.
Yeah.
So that was just a really interesting, and I always go back to it. Is to me, that is a form of writing, and I absolutely love it.
I find that really interesting. Just to slightly go off topic really quickly, in that I worked at the BBC a few years ago, and it was tended to get TV and radio and online and writing were put into different silos, like they could never cross. And my argument all the time then was, this is just storytelling. Storytelling. It
Yes.
doesn't. The medium doesn't matter. If the story's good, it will work across. I mean, you get various things, like something might not have a very good picture, but generally it will work across all platforms if the story's good enough.
Yeah. One of my most favorite documentary doesn't have a single line of dialogue, and I'm
Right.
glued into it. It's called Baraka, and there's no dialogue. So music, and there's images, and you make your story in your head as you watch all the images unfold. And it's quite dramatic. I've seen people crying with that movie. I've seen people laughing, or you have a combination of emotions going through when you see that. And there's
Mm.
no. I'm pretty sure they did a lot of writing, because you have to plan that to do
Yeah.
what they did, which is insane. It's unbelievable. But there's no dialogues. So, and what an incredible way for storytelling. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. When it came to the Monarch Ultra, how hard was it to craft a story around runners? Because I'm thinking, basically to a degree, you had days and days of them doing the same thing, running.
Yeah. Yeah.
So did the star become the background and what they were running through, I suppose?
I wrote and rewrote things over and over again, like 25 times at least, and trying to craft a story that was going to work out. But I always knew that I want to tell the runners and the monarch butterfly stories at the same time. So
Mm.
it happens parallel. So we can connect with one and the other at the same time. When you see a runner, you might think in mono butterfly. When you see a mono butterfly, you might think in other runners. And that was the big puzzle. How am I going to achieve that? Once I was filming, you're absolutely right. It becomes so monotonous. It's like, here comes another runner. I'll get the camera out, and there's not much happening here. But I took advantage of a few, detours that we did and some interviews along the way that kind of helped me to shape the story more, and try to capture as many things of the scenario when it's different, because sometimes you're in Midwest US and it's every single shot is exactly the same, one after another one. There's nothing changed for
Mm.
hundreds of miles probably.
Yeah.
So that was hard, and capture as many runners as I can, but I know that the story will unfold once we start describing what the monarch butterfly sees. And then when you put it combining, now you see variety, and then you're not just sick looking at runners. You have to have the running story, but also the environmental story combined together to make it interesting. At least that's what it was in my head. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense, and it definitely comes through in the film. I suppose one thing you must have had going along the whole route as you did was an absolute box seat in seeing the pain that the runners had to put themselves through to complete each leg of the journey. And it's a little while since I watched it actually, Rodney. So I feel slightly good. I rewatched it. It's very bad. But I think there was one chap who was setting off to do a leg, and he kind of didn't make it to the end of the leg, which just proved how hard this is to do.
Yeah.
Or however good a runner you might be.
And many of the runners, they were running the first 50K.
Yeah.
And many of the runners have done marathons, and they don't come the first 20 or 30. They're not on the first half. Their timing is a bit on the lower side. And for me, even if I wanted to finish faster, so I don't have to go to bed at 11 o'clock at night, the point with the Monarch Ultra was to show how hard it is. I don't need to have a very famous ultra marathon runner there that is going to do it in 4 hours, which we got
Yeah.
some people who did it around that time. But the whole point is like anybody can run, and you might not be a professional runner, but the fact that someone that is not a professional runner, it can actually pull this off. For me, it was mind blowing. So you have to have a big commitment. And I talk for experience. When I used to race and I did those triathlons, I always did sprint. And the reason I do sprints because I want to be done by an hour and 20 minutes. And that's it. That's my time. An hour and
Yeah.
20 minutes doing a sprint triathlon, I'm good. That was a good timing. I'm fine with that. But I don't like being hours and hours on the road doing something, unless I'm doing a bike trip or something like that. It's different. But being on a race, you really have to be very strong mentally. And that to me is the most interesting part of long distance running. And
Mm.
what these people were doing, many they were hurt. You can tell they were hurt, and they just continue going. It's kind of like if you train for your first Olympic, and you've been training for 4 years, and once you're on the race, you're gonna finish no matter what. I mean, you're
Yeah.
gonna finish even if you have to carry yourself on or hobble on one leg. And
Yeah.
the interesting, this is not the Olympics, and people were doing it. So that's the strong commitment that they have for the cause, and to me, that was very special. Like I admire that much more. I also admire the physical aspect, but I admire that don't much more. Like I could run the 50 kilometer if I would have trained for it, but I decided not to. I decided to continue with my filmmaking, but it's not something that fully interests me uh,
Mm.
to do. You really have to be mentally strong to do it, and especially in those conditions when you're on a highway, it's like 35 degrees Celsius, and you're running on black pavement, which feels a lot hotter than that, and you don't see a human being for the next 10 kilometers. And every 10 kilometers is becoming longer and longer and longer. It was brutal, and
Mm.
I think that was very special to see people pushing themselves that hard.
Yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, it wasn't even a race. Sometimes you have races where you're running huge distances and you won't see other competitors, but you kind of know they're out there. You know
Yeah.
that they're doing it, and if you're just running, 50K pretty much on your own, you could drop out at any time you wanted. There's probably not going to be any judgment. It's incredibly tough and incredibly, you know, brave of them almost to just carry on and keep churning out those distances and those miles, particularly if it's not something that someone's regularly done. So yeah, hats off for sure to the people who did that. And I think there were one or two, Carlotta included, who actually did kind of back to back runs and so on as well, weren't there?
Carlota did a lot of runs because we couldn't fill all the legs. We couldn't fill. We have a lot of gaps. We couldn't find a runner here or a runner there, and so both Carlota and Clay Williams, the race director, they ran many few times to cover all those gaps that were so we can actually have the whole route. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, she did. It's amazing. Like she ran and then he had to run again 3 days later or 4 days later or something like that. And she's never done anything like this. It was too fast. The turnaround was too quick.
Mm.
But she did it anyways, and that was very inspiring.
Yeah. Do you know? I mean, that kind of, it was too hard. It was too much. It was too fast. It was too much of a but they did it. She did it everywhere.
Exactly.
That I think that just sums up both what makes, well, I suppose three things. What makes this, what made that race happen, what makes people do that in ultra running and running in general, and then also, you know, kind of going back to the reason behind it, what the butterflies do every time they do it. They kind of just do it, don't they?
Yeah, they just do it. They have their internal clock or something that tells them we have to go to Mexico. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Because that's the fascinating about this story. Like we know so many different butterflies, but the monarch is special for us because they go to a place that's never been before. They fly 4,000 kilometers to a place they've never been. They don't know the route. They don't have Google Maps. They don't have, so they just kind of follow their instincts, get some wings to help them out, and then they have to find flowers, and they just have to continue going. And it's quite remarkable, like how many species that small do that kind of migration. Uh, it's almost unknown. There are
Yeah.
others in Europe and
They
Africa.
get lost,
They
don't
do
they?
big, yeah. But this is quite remarkable. And then when they're in Mexico, they stay there for a few months.
Mm.
They mate, the males die, and then the female, that same that flew the 4,000 kilometers, they start flying north.
Right.
And after they lay the first eggs, which is probably northern Mexico, south of Texas, that sounds, they still have to fly quite a bit. That's where they finally died. And then it takes another 4 or 5 generations of monarch butterflies to come back to Mexico, to Canada, in the northern
Right.
US. And then the last generation is called the Matusalem. It's a bigger butterfly than the other ones. Those are the ones that are flying back to Mexico. So that cycle, it's really interesting and have interest scientists for many years.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
that's what makes it remarkable. Yeah.
yeah, no, that's amazing. I didn't realize that. I kind of thought it was a I don't know, an every year migratory journey,
Yeah. Like birds.
like birds, like migratory birds, I suppose. I hadn't really thought about it. So that's
Yeah.
amazing. That sort of that cycle happening over that 4 or 5
Yeah.
years. And therefore, as you said, which was going to be something I was going to come back on, that explains and answers my question as to why it would be the first time that anyone would,
Yeah. So they do a
anyone would
relay.
start that journey.
They do a relay like we did down there. They do a relay to come north.
Yeah, yeah. Oh wow, no, that's really really interesting. I didn't know that. So yeah, thank you for educating me on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I suppose as time ticks by on this interview slightly, we'd better let people know where they can go and find the Monarch Ultra film and where they can watch it and see what it's all about in documentary form.
Well, the documentary is hitting right now the film festival run.
Mm.
I just have actually we just got an award for outstanding excellence for the Hispanic Film Festival in the U.S.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that's great. I just got the email like 2 days ago. And once the festival run is done, I mean, we're offering during the festival run, we also offering community screenings, and people can organize a screening to show the documentary and also have a discussion about either running or monarch butterflies and conservation of insect pollinators. And that we've had quite a few in Canada already. We want to expand more towards the US. We want to have some in Mexico, and then in Europe, hopefully. So that's number one. And after that finish, maybe in a year or two, maybe a year from now, I will release it more likely on
Brilliant.
demand, like platforms like Vimeo or any other platform where you kind of rent the movie and you can watch it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
you go to that website, I don't know if you put that on the description, but as you go to the website, the Monarch Ultra film, I will have it updated next week, and then we'll have all the information of which festivals will come in, and also about the community screenings as well.
Oh, fantastic! Well, we'll
Yeah.
we'll grab that off you. We'll make sure it's in the show notes. I'll make sure it's on my Substack, and I'm sure Jason, who's producing today, will make sure it's on Run Try Bike. In fact, he's saying they've got it, so he's
Nice.
ahead of the game. So that's good as well. And if other people are listening to this and think, do you know what, I'd love to have a community showing of that, or I've got a big film festival coming up and I'd love to show that because it sounds great. How do they get in contact with you and make that happen?
Well, there's a couple of ways. One is through the website, the Monarch Ultra Film. We have a contact info there, and they can just kind of click on contact and send an email, or they can email me personally as well. And then I will have whatever information they need. I will have it sent out to them. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic! Well, it'd be brilliant to see the film hit as many festivals and showings as possible, and really spread the word about the ultra as well. So yeah, good luck with all of that. Um, are there any plans, perhaps not in the near future, but maybe in the distant future, to put on the full event again, the full migratory route?
Carlota and I have talked about it. That maybe that's something we want to do it again.
Yeah.
But we don't have specific date or time. I think it's we'll have to see how things unfold. But we have thought about it. What would happen if we do it again? I mean, the logistic was massive. We have to purchase an IV, and then we sold it after the event. Because as we kind of wanted to cook as we were inside, and we can carry all of our stuff and offer the supports to the runners. Like the runners, every 10 kilometers will be there in case they need something. Sometimes they didn't, but it's good to know that, for them to know that we were there. We don't have Clay Williams to join us again, so we'll have to find someone else to help us with the route again. And we might actually choose something a little different to do it, so we can hit a little bit more trails compared to last time. So it's been in our mind that we want to do it again. We still feel we have unfinished business, and hopefully in the next few years we can capitalize on that and redo it. Yeah. We also thought about doing one on the West Coast and doing through the mountains, and just going from Vancouver all the way down to California. That population is actually in very, very bad shape right now because of all the forest fires. So it would be awesome to organize that. But for that, we need a champion. We need someone who can help us, because we don't live out west, to organize that route and then do it. And then we'll go and participate and film it and do everything else. But that is also an idea that we have in mind as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to sound really sort of cynical about the whole issue, but I think having the LA fires and so on to sort of say this is happening, sort of thing, is almost a bit of an extra string to your bow in trying to champion something like that, because it's something that people can really see, and that has become a major issue that everyone has spoken to about at national and international level. Rodney, I'm sure we have a massive community across the Everyday Athlete podcast network and across Run Try Bike, and I'm sure if you're looking to do that, just keep chatting to us and to the people on here if you're listening. Let's try and make this happen again. It was probably not going to be this year or next year, but yeah, let's try and make this happen, because I think it's an absolutely brilliant event. I would have to somehow find my way all the way over from the UK to Canada. I have to persuade Michelle to let me go across the world to Ontario and then travel all the way down to Mexico or something. But yeah, if I could make that happen, it'd be amazing.
Yeah. Well, it also would be incredible if somebody takes the idea and organize a run like this in Africa, in Europe, in Asia, there are other migratory species there, and there are other species that also are suffering from climate change, and generally the populations are in decline. So I really think that we could hopefully inspire people to also organize runs, not necessarily about butterflies, but just pick your winner, pick your case, your
I
cause.
could
Sorry, pick your cause, and bring the
I could bring my
runners.
birds back again.
Yeah, I mean, how awesome that runners can do more runs
Hmm.
like this and organize more this kind of run. I think it's just a different way to run, I guess. I don't know. You tell me. You're more a runner than I am.
Well, no, I think it definitely is, and I think we do, as runners, we do run for causes. You mentioned things earlier,
Mm.
like running for cancer, or I don't know, Parkinson's disease, or homelessness, or whatever the cause might be. And you look at events like London Marathon, obviously sticks in my mind, but I'm sure New York, Chicago, Boston,
Right.
Tokyo are
Yeah.
all the same, where you just have hundreds and thousands of runners running for charity. So I suppose it's about fostering that energy, and using it for say this particular cause, or for other similar causes, because it's definitely out there. People love to have a why when they're running, whatever that why is, and for a lot of people,
Yeah.
a particular cause that's close to their heart is that why.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for doing this thing, because I think your podcast will hit a lot of runners, and it will be so amazing to see more and more down the running community joining environmental causes. I would love to see that. Yeah.
Oh no, you're um, absolutely welcome. I would encourage everybody out there to try and find out where the Monarch Ultra is being shown near to them, and if it's not, have a word with somebody who might be able to show it in the community, and get that happening. As I say, we'll get the notes in the show notes, all the links and stuff, so people can find it. This interview with Rodney will be turned into a story on my Substack, runningtales.substack.com, and I know that there'll be stuff on the Run Try Bike website as well. So everybody keep an eye out for that, so you can find out how you can get further involved in this. Rodney, thank you so much for joining me today. We will keep in touch, and I really appreciate A, your time, B, what you do for the Monarch Butterflies, and C, the film, because it's really, really good, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here with you.
Cheers. Yeah, so thank you everybody for joining us today for another Running Tales podcast. As I said at the start, we're part of the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. We are one of, I think it's 9 shows. We're an increasingly large community, people can listen to all of those shows on all the normal places like Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and all those places. So please do listen to that. Please like and share. Give us a nice positive review. You can comment on Spotify too, which is very exciting, new thing, and they all help to make those algorithms, which are so important to us. I mean, I hate those algorithms, but I also love them because they mean that more people get to listen to the stories we tell, and the stories of people like Rodney, and the stories of the Monarch Ultra, and so on. So listen, folks, I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. We'll be back in another 2 weeks with another Running Tales podcast here on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. And thank you once again for joining me today.